Welcome to the Body Science Podcast. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really specific training philosophy, the starting strength method, the one often linked with Mark Rippetoe.
Right. And we're aiming to unpack it, really look at the core ideas, the science they lean on, and, well, how it works in the real world.
See what it's all about and who it might actually be good for.
And it kicks off with a pretty bold statement, doesn't it? The material basically argues that physical strength is, well, maybe the most important physical quality.
The most important. Wow. Okay, that's a strong stance, especially when you hear so much about cardio or flexibility. Why strength above all else?
Well, the reasoning given is that strength is seen as this fundamental physical adaptation. It's the base layer, you could say.
A base layer.
Yeah, the idea is that if you build a solid foundation of strength first, getting better at other things, endurance, speed, power, whatever, becomes, well, easier, more efficient.
Like building the engine before you worry about the paint job or the top speed.
Something like that, yeah. And it goes beyond just lifting performance. There's that quote in there, too.
Oh, yeah. The weak people are not as happy as strong people. That definitely pushes it into the psychological realm.
It really does. The sources directly tie getting physically stronger to, feeling better mentally, more secure, more confident.
So lifting weights isn't just about the weights themselves.
Exactly. It's framed as boosting your sense of self-efficacy, your belief that you can actually do things. Though it's fair to say the material does suggest this is one perspective, and strength is one valuable piece of the whole health puzzle, not the only piece.
Okay, so there's a deliberate psychological angle. What about those less obvious goals? You mentioned self-efficacy, mental toughness.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
Right.
Lifting is even called a powerful psychological intervention. There's this interesting analogy they use, the lifter as happy Sisyphus.
Happy Sisyphus. Pushing the boulder, but happy.
That sounds paradoxical. What's the idea there?
It points towards finding meaning, maybe even satisfaction, in the struggle itself, the effort.
The connection they make is that grappling with a heavy weight, that physical challenge, it sort of trains you. It builds skills for dealing with other difficulties life throws at you.
Is that the barbell doesn't lie, right? It's just physics.
Precisely. That brutal reality, unbiased quality is key. You either make the lift with good form or you don't. There's no arguing.
And seeing yourself overcome that, adding a little weight, getting stronger week by week.
That clear, measurable progress directly builds that self-belief, that self-efficacy. Especially for beginners, the sources suggest those psychological wins can be even more significant, more lasting than just the numbers on the bar.
Okay, so this whole philosophy, strength as foundational, tied to resilience and confidence, that explains the program's focus then. Why it's so streamlined, just a few big lifts.
Exactly. The philosophy drives the method. Focus on a few key exercises that let you move heavy weight, stress the whole system efficiently, and build that fundamental strength base. Maximum bang for your buck, essentially.
Got it. So philosophy, psychology. Let's talk about the engine behind it. How does the science work? How do people actually get stronger with this, especially beginners?
Right. This is where the stress recovery adaptation principle comes in, SRA. It's biology 101 for improvement, really.
Stress, recover, adapt. Simple enough.
You apply stress, that's the workout, your body recovers, and during that recovery, it adapts, it overcompensates slightly, so it's stronger for the next time.
And starting strength really pushes this cycle hard at the start, doesn't it?
It does. It's specifically designed for what they call the novice phase, someone brand new to structured strength training.
Why novices specifically?
Because novices are highly sensitive to the training stress. They don't need a ton of volume or crazy intensity to kickstart that adaptation process. And crucially, they recover and adapt really quickly compared to more experienced lifters.
Meaning they can hit it hard again soon.
Yes. The typical setup is training 3 times a week. And the core idea is adding a little bit of weight to the bar every single session.
Every time. Wow.
Yep. That constant small increase in stress drives that continuous progress, that linear progression, milking that rapid adaptation window novices have.
But, reality check, you can't add weight forever, every single workout. When does that amazing progress typically slow down?
Right, and the sources acknowledge that. As you get stronger, lifting heavier weights is just inherently more stressful. The absolute load increases.
That's more out of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it demands more recovery time, better nutrition, more sleep. And a really key point they make is that when that linear progress stalls, often it's because recovery is falling short. Not enough sleep, too much outside stress, poor diet, that becomes the bottleneck.
So recovery isn't just resting, it's actively managing everything around the lifting.
Absolutely. It's where the actual growth and strengthening happens. Neglecting it is a fast track to hitting a plateau, or worse, getting injured.
Okay, philosophy, SRA. And the main tool is the barbell. Why such a focus on the barbell? What makes it so special for this system?
The material makes a pretty strong case for the barbell being the most effective tool for building that foundational general strength we talked about. There are a few key reasons highlighted.
Let's hear them.
Okay, first, and this is vital for the program's structure, progressive loading. Barbells make it really easy to add weight in small, precise steps.
Like with those tiny plates, microplates.
Exactly. Adding just a pound or half a kilo. That precision allows for those consistent small jumps needed for linear progression. That's harder to do accurately with dumbbells or mini machines.
Right, you get just enough extra stress. What else?
Well, the main lifts, squat, deadlift, press, bench press, they're based on fundamental human movements, things we're sort of built to do.
Okay, makes sense.
And importantly, they train the body as a whole system working together, not just muscles in isolation.
So doing a heavy squat isn't just legs, it's core, back, everything stabilizing.
Precisely. You're using multiple joints, tons of muscle mass working in coordination. This builds balance, coordination, proprioception, your body's awareness of itself in space.
Which you might not get as much from a machine that guides the movement.
That's the argument. Machines provide stability, which can be useful sometimes, but they don't force your body to create that stability itself. Barbells present a more complex challenge to your whole neuromuscular system.
A bigger neurological demand, then.
Yeah, helping develop overall movement skill. Now, the sources do add some nuance. Barbells are the goal. But things like bodyweight exercises, dumbbells, maybe even machines can be okay starting points if someone isn't quite ready for the barbell.
Sensible preparation.
And the program itself stresses starting light, like really light, empty bar, even a PVC pipe sometimes. The focus initially is 100% on nailing the technique before adding serious weight.
So learn the movement, then load the movement. Got it. This focus on big, compound lifts seems aimed at building a specific type of strength. What's that called again?
They call it general strength or general physical preparedness, GPP. The goal isn't necessarily to be the best at one specific sport or to sculpt a particular look, initially anyway. It's about building a broad base of strength that helps you do anything physical better, improving your overall functional capacity for life.
Like a physical toolkit that makes everything else easier?
Yeah, you could think of it like that. There's mention of a two-factor model, training versus practice. GPP is the training part. It builds the general physical qualities that support the practice of specific skills, whether that's playing tennis or carrying groceries.
Which ties back to that very memorable quote.
Stronger people are harder to kill and generally more useful. Yeah.
It's blunt, but it gets the point across.
It really frames the ambition beyond just gym performance. It suggests strength makes you more resilient, more capable in everyday life. They even talk about this kind of training as a sort of substitute for primitive man's activities, like we're reclaiming some lost physical capacity.
Interesting framing. And does this focus on GPP explain why you often don't see lots of, like, bicep curls or calf raises in the basic program?
That's the idea. The philosophy is that by hammering the big compound lifts, you strengthen the major muscles and the whole system so effectively that the smaller assisting muscles get strong enough for general purposes along the way. You focus on the big rocks first.
Okay, this all sounds very effective, especially for someone starting from scratch. But is starting strength the answer for everyone, for every goal? Let's be real.
And the sources are pretty clear on this.
Yeah.
No. It's highly effective for its target audience, true beginners, young athletes needing a strength base. But it's not pitched as the one-size-fits-all solution for every fitness goal out there.
But it has been used more broadly.
Oh, yeah. The material mentions it being used successfully with a wide range of people, different ages, genders, health backgrounds. They give examples from starting strength gyms where the average client might be in their 50s, and lots of women train this way. So it's adaptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what are the potential downsides or practical issues people should be aware of?
Well, practically, you need the gear. A barbell, a solid squat rack, plates, a bench that's essential, and not every gym has the right setup, or maybe you train at home. That can be a barrier.
Equipment access, right?
And the sources do acknowledge the potential for monotony. Doing the same few lifts multiple times a week, week after week, some people might find that repetitive over the long haul.
I can see that. Squats, press, deadlift, repeat. Might get old for some.
There's also talk of the potential for uneven development, sometimes called Tyranno mode, jokingly maybe building a lot of lower body and back strength relative to upper body pressing strength or overall aesthetics.
Ah, the T-Rex look?
Kind of. So if your main goal is perfectly balanced aesthetics right off the bat, this might not be the most direct route without adding other exercises later.
Yeah.
And while it builds amazing strength, it might not be the absolute fastest path if your number one goal is purely muscle size, hypertrophy, or specific endurance.
Fair enough. What about the sometimes controversial nutrition advice associated with it, like GeoMad?
Gallon of milk a day. Yeah, that's a big one the material addresses. That kind of super aggressive eating advice works wonders for, say, an underweight teenage boy trying to bulk up fast.
But probably not for a 50-year-old woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sources strongly emphasize that this kind of nutritional advice needs major adjustment, or just throwing out, for many people, older folks, women, anyone already carrying extra weight. The core lifting principles can be adapted widely, but the extra stuff, especially nutrition and recovery expectations, has to be tailored to the individual. There are even specific resources, like the book The Barbell Prescription, that focus entirely on modifying this approach for older adults.
So personalization is key, especially beyond that initial novice phase.
Absolutely. The program is simple to start, follow the steps, add weight. But getting the best results long-term, knowing when linear progress is done, how to adjust things, when maybe to switch to a different style of training, that takes more understanding.
More knowledge, or maybe coaching.
Right, that point where you can't just add 5 pounds every workout anymore. That's a common sticking point, especially if you're training alone. Figuring out what to do next is crucial and requires some know-how.
Okay, so a powerful system, especially for beginners wanting foundational strength, but with caveats and the need for smart application as you progress.
That sums it up pretty well. It lays a potent foundation.
So thinking about all this, if building that base of physical strength really is such a direct route to improving not just how you move, but how you feel, how resilient you are, how might embracing a simple, maybe even demanding system like this actually change things for you beyond just the muscle? All right, let's dive right into it. We're talking foundational strength today, not just lifting weights, but really getting into the fundamental movements that build overall strength and power from the ground up.
Exactly. We're looking at 5 key lifts here: the squat, the press, deadlift, bench press, and the power clean. These aren't just random picks. They are incredibly effective, total body movements.
Right.
But their power, it really lies entirely in the precision of their technique. Safety in getting the most benefit, while they really hinge on understanding the specific how behind each one.
So our mission then is to unpack the crucial technical points for each lift, sort of distilling the most important insights into why they work and, well, how to approach them effectively. Think of this as the shortcut to understanding the mechanics that really matter. Let's start with the squat, often called the king of lifts. The source material really emphasizes a low bar position and this idea of hip drive. What's the core idea there?
Well, the fundamental thing with this specific low bar squat is how it deliberately shifts the emphasis.
Yeah.
Unlike a high bar squat where the bar's right on top of your traps, the low bar position places it lower. It rests just below the spine of the scapula, kind of on that shelf created by the rear deltoids.
Okay, why lower?
Why do this? Well, it lowers the center of gravity of the whole system, you and the bar making it more stable. But crucially, it positions you to heavily engage the posterior chain.
And the posterior chain being, remind us.
Right, those powerful muscles on the back of your body.
Yeah.
Your hamstrings, your glutes, and the muscles running all along your spine. The spinal erectors. This low bar position really maximizes their involvement.
Okay, so how do you even get set up under the bar in that position? It sounds specific.
It is. Good question. First, you want to set the bar height in the rack around your mid-sternum level.
Right, so no half squatting it out.
Exactly. And when you get under the bar in that low bar spot, your stance should probably be slightly wider than shoulder width, feet angled outwards, maybe around 30 degrees or so.
Got it. And the depth, there's a specific target, right? Not just go low.
Absolutely. No half reps here. The crease of your hip must descend at least, say, 1 to 3 inches below the top of your knee.
Okay.
This makes sure you're getting full range of motion and properly recruiting those powerful hip extensors.
And that leads us to the hip drive. It sounds unique. What does that actually mean you should feel or do coming out of the bottom?
Right. Hip drive is really the key to leveraging that posterior chain. When you hit depth, instead of thinking about lifting your chest straight up first,
which feels natural sometimes.
It does. But instead, you initiate the ascent by driving your hips vertically, powerfully upwards. Imagine your hips are leading the charge straight up out of the hole towards the ceiling.
Okay. How does the rest of your body work with that if the hips are driving up?
Well, because your hips are driving vertically and the bar's on your back, your torso will naturally lean forward a bit. This keeps the bar balanced over your midfoot. Exactly. There's a cue, nipples to the floor, which kind of captures this angle. Your torso angle is directly linked to maintaining that correct bar path, and your gaze should be fixed maybe 4 or 5 feet ahead on the floor.
Why gaze is down?
It just helps maintain a neutral spine and neck position. If you try to lift your chest first, like we said, you actually lose the tension in your hamstrings that you built at the bottom. Makes the lift harder, less efficient.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is how this whole setup, this movement pattern, it fundamentally changes the lift's biomechanics.
Now so specifically.
Well, the low bar position and that torso angle, they significantly reduce the leverage working against your back, what some call the moment arm on the spine. Makes it safer for heavier weights.
Okay.
And it dramatically increases the leverage for your hamstrings and glutes. Hip drive is the technique that lets you actually use those powerful muscles to start and drive the ascent. It makes the low bar squat very hip dominant, unlike, say, a high bar or front squat, which are more quad dominant.
So if someone's hips shoot up way faster than their chest, that good morning squat look.
Yeah, the stripper squat, some call it.
Right. Is that a failure of hip drive?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
a classic sign that the timing is off. The torso and leg extension aren't synced, and the hips aren't leading that vertical drive. The back angle isn't being maintained relative to the hips rising.
So mastering the timing is key.
Absolutely. Mastering the timing of the hip drive, driving hips vertically while maintaining that forward torso angle. It's crucial to avoid putting excessive strain on the back. It takes coordination, practice, definitely, especially if mobility is limited. But that hip dominant strength, that's the core insight here.
Okay, let's shift focus upwards now. The press. The overhead press. This lift feels different. You're standing, pushing weight overhead. It's not just shoulders, is it?
Not at all. I mean, sure, it clearly builds shoulder and tricep strength, but the press, done effectively, it's really a test of total body rigidity and stability. You're generating force that has to travel all the way up from your feet through a completely braced core to that bar overhead.
Walk us through setting up for it then. How does that start?
Okay, grip width is important. You want your forearms to be pretty much vertical when the bar is resting at your chest level.
Okay.
This usually puts your hands just slightly outside your shoulders, and the bar should sit low on the heel of your palm, keeping your wrists neutral, not bent way back.
And the bar path, it can't go straight up because, well, your head's in the way.
Precisely. You start with the bar at your chest, right? As you push, you need to sort of skim your chin or nose on the way up.
Bash your head back.
Yeah, pull your head back slightly, push the bar slightly back initially as it clears your face, then it finishes directly overhead, stack vertically over your shoulders, and your midfoot when you look from the side. And a subtle but important detail is elbow position.
Where should they be pointing?
You want them slightly ahead of the bar throughout the lift, not flared straight out to the sides.
What's it?
It helps create a solid shelf for the bar and ensures efficient force transfer, vertically. Letting them flare out wide early just leaks power and can put stress on the shoulder joint.
Okay, the source mentions a hip rebound. This sounds like a little bounce. Isn't that kind of cheating? Or a push press?
That's a great question because it is often misunderstood. It is definitely not a push press where your legs are the main engine driving the bar up significantly.
Right.
The hip rebound is incredibly subtle. It's a small, sharp, vertical movement of the hips right at the very beginning of the push. Think of it like a quick, small bounce or twitch.
Just a little kickstart.
Exactly. Just to give that stationary bar a tiny bit of upward momentum, overcome inertia. The crucial part is that immediately after this minimal movement, your entire torso becomes absolutely rigid, and the rest of the lift is powered purely by your upper body push.
Got it. Minimalist assist. Hand at the top. Straighten the arms.
Full lockout is essential. Elbows completely straight. And don't forget the shrug. As you finish the press, actively shrug your shoulders up towards your ears.
Why the shrug?
It helps lock the bar into a really stable position overhead and engages the upper back and traps, which are vital stabilizers up there.
So keeping that whole body tight, core and glutes are involved then?
Oh, absolutely critical. Actively bracing your core, squeezing your glutes, provides that trunk stability. Without that rigidity, force just leaks out. You risk excessive backward arching, that layback.
Yes, seen that.
And you just can't transfer maximal power to the bar. It protects your spine and ultimately makes the press stronger.
So what are the common mistakes you see, and what's the sort of key insight about this particular press technique?
Well, the core insight is that this strict overhead press, done with total body tension and maybe that subtle hip rebound, builds incredible usable overhead strength and stability. Common mistakes, definitely excessive layback, letting the elbows flare too wide too early, not getting full lockout, and the shrug at the top.
Or turning that rebound into a full push.
Or turning that subtle hip rebound into a full-on push press, yeah. Presses often progress slower than, say, squats or deadlifts because they use smaller muscle groups and demand such high stability. When progress stalls, microloading, adding just a pound or two each session, can be really effective. These specific techniques help maximize the effectiveness and safety of what is a really challenging lift.
All right, let's get grounded again, literally with the deadlift, pulling heavy weight right off the floor. This one feels like it uses, well, everything, especially that posterior chain again.
Oh, yeah.
The source material puts a lot of emphasis on a precise 5-step setup. Why is that setup so critical?
The setup is the absolute game changer for the deadlift. It's not just, a sequence of steps you go through. It's how you build crucial tension and get into the strongest, safest possible position before the bar even thinks about leaving the floor.
Okay.
Get this right. And the lick is far more efficient, far safer. Get it wrong, and you're fighting the weight with bad leverage, or worse, putting your back at significant risk.
Okay, walk us through those 5 steps then. Let's break it down.
All right. 1. Stance. First, feet about hip width apart. Stand so the barbell is cutting your foot right in half, basically, over the midfoot. Your shins should be very close, maybe an inch away from the bar initially.
Okay, midfoot. Got it.
2. Grip. Now bend down without moving the bar and grip it. Hands just outside your legs. You can use a double overhand grip or an alternate grip if the weight gets heavy.
Right.
3. Shin position. This is where you set your starting hip height, and it's key. Bend your knees forward until your shins lightly touch the bar. The bar still shouldn't move. You're not dropping your hips low like a squat here. You're bringing shins to the bar.
Okay, shins touch the bar. Check.
4. Chest up, back straight. Now lock in that neutral spine. Lift your chest up. Think proud chest. Flatten your back, maintaining its natural curves. Your gaze should be slightly down and forward, maybe 10-15 feet ahead on the floor to keep your neck neutral.
Setting the back. Crucial.
5. Slack removal and pull. This is the final tensioning step before liftoff. Straighten your arms completely. Feel like you're pulling the slack or bend out of the bar. Create tension against it so you might hear a little click from the plates or feel the bar wanting to lift, but it hasn't left the floor yet.
Feel the weight.
Yes. Your shoulders will start slightly ahead of the bar. As you pull the slack out, they should move pretty much directly over or even slightly behind the bar. Then initiate the pull by thinking about driving the floor away with your legs, like a leg press motion.
Not just pulling with the back.
Absolutely not. Your hips and shoulders should ideally rise at the same speed. Keep that back angle constant until the bar clears your knees. Once it's past the knees, then you powerfully push your hips forward, squeeze your glutes hard, and finish standing tall.
You mentioned safety. What's the single most critical point there?
Without a shadow of a doubt, maintaining a neutral spine throughout the entire lift, from setup to lockout. Allowing your back to round, especially the lower back, under load is where the serious risk lies. That setup procedure is designed specifically to help you achieve and maintain that neutrality.
And the biomechanical goal of this specific setup, why these steps?
It's all about achieving optimal leverage for a heavy pull right off the floor. Bar over midfoot, shins touching the bar, chest up, slack out this specific configuration. Balances the tension in the hamstrings and glutes, with the necessary quad involvement to create the most efficient vertical bar path possible.
I can see how just grabbing the bar and yanking it would mess all that up.
Exactly. Common mistakes flow directly from deviating from that setup. Starting with the hips too low, like trying to squat it up. Starting with hips too high, putting all the strain on the back. Letting the bar drift away from your body during the pull.
Right.
Trying to lift primarily with your back instead of driving with the legs. Or having your hips shoot up way faster than your shoulders off the floor. That push the floor away cue is vital. It reminds you to use your powerful legs, keeps the hips and shoulders rising together, and takes strain off the back. Mastering this precise setup is the fundamental insight for a safe, strong deadlift.
Let's transition to the bench press. Often called the king of upper body pushing exercises. Chest, shoulders, triceps are the obvious players, but like the other lifts, this approach treats it as a whole body movement for stability.
It absolutely is a whole body lift when done this way. The ability to handle really serious weight on the bench comes from creating full body tension and a rock-solid, stable base on the bench itself.
How do you set up for that kind of stability?
Well, first, you need those 5 points of contact locked down. Your head, both shoulder blades, your hips, and both feet must be firmly planted, either on the floor or potentially on blocks if needed.
Okay, 5 points.
And a key initial step before you even unrack the bar is actively retracting and depressing your shoulder blades.
Okay, break that down. Retracting and depressing. What does that feel like?
Retracting means pinching your shoulder blades together on the bench, like you're trying to hold a pencil between them. Depressing means pulling them down towards your feet, away from your ears.
Ah, creating a shelf.
Exactly. Doing this creates a stable, solid platform on the bench. It protects your shoulder joints and helps position your chest for better muscle engagement. You do this before you lie down and maintain it.
And the arch in the lower back. You see some big arches sometimes. What's the deal there?
A natural arch in your lower back is actually perfectly fine, even beneficial in this specific technique. It can help shorten the range of motion slightly, raises your chest up higher, putting you in a mechanically stronger position to press. The crucial rule, though, is that your hips must remain in contact with the bench throughout the entire lift. No lifting the butt off the bench.
Right, hips stay down. What about grip width?
Generally, like the press, you want your forearms pretty much vertical when the bar's at the bottom, touching your chest. A common starting point is placing your pinky finger, or maybe your ring finger, on the power rings of the barbell.
Okay. And where does the rest of the body contribute beyond just these points of contact? You mentioned whole body.
Right, that's where leg drive comes in. This is huge. Your feet aren't just passively resting on the floor, they are planted firmly. And you are actively using force from your legs, pushing through the floor to sort of drive your body back towards the rack, jamming your upper back into the bench.
So you're pushing backwards almost.
Yeah, think about pushing yourself along the bench towards the spotter using your legs. This leg drive creates tension throughout your entire body, locks you onto the bench, provides incredible stability, and allows you to transfer more force into the bar. It connects your lower body strength to your upper body push.
What about the bar path itself? Straight down, straight up?
Not quite straight. You lower the bar under control to your mid-chest, or maybe slightly lower, towards the sternum. As you push powerfully upwards, the bar should follow a slight natural arc, moving slightly back up towards your shoulders as you extend your arms to lockout.
So the core insight on the bench here is really about that stability.
Absolutely. The core insight is that the bench press, approach this way with full body tension, that scapular control, the arch, and active leg drive transforms from just a simple chest exercise into a stable, powerful system. A system capable of moving much heavier loads and doing it more safely.
And common mistakes.
Common mistakes really undermine that system. Things like excessive elbow flare, letting your elbows drift straight out to the sides.
Yeah, hurts the shoulders.
Can definitely stress the shoulders, bouncing the bar hard off your chest, letting your wrists bend way back under the load, or completely neglecting the leg drives, having your feet limp on the floor. All these compromise stability and power.
Makes sense.
Yeah, the emphasis on scapular retraction, the controlled arch, and that leg drive is what makes this specific bench technique so effective for building foundational pushing strength. An incorrect bar path, like hitting too high on the chest or trying to push strictly vertically, often comes from poor upper back engagement or not understanding how leg drive should anchor you. It just makes the lift less efficient and can stress the shoulders.
Okay, finally, the power clean. This one definitely looks and feels very different from the others. It's all about speed, explosiveness, and it looks technically pretty challenging.
It is, yeah. It's definitely the most technically demanding lift of the 5 we're discussing, and honestly, often the most frustrating for beginners to learn.
So why include it if it's so tough?
Well, its purpose in this kind of program isn't necessarily about lifting the absolute maximal weight like you'd see a competitive Olympic weightlifter doing a full squat clean. It's specifically included to develop explosive power.
Power, not just strength.
Exactly. The ability to move weight quickly and forcefully. You're focused on pulling the bar high enough to catch it in a power position, usually like a quarter or half squat depth, not necessarily sinking into a deep squat under it.
Gotcha. So what are the main phases of this explosive lift? How does it break down?
You can think of it in a few key parts. Starting position. It actually starts pretty similar to a deadlift setup, bar over midfoot. But usually your hips will be slightly lower than your deadlift start, and your shoulders will be a bit more forward over the bar. Back flat, of course.
Okay.
First pull. This is from the floor up to just below your knees. It should look very similar to the start of your deadlift, Maintain your back angle, use your legs to drive the bar off the ground, and critically, keep the bar close to your body.
Like shaving your shins.
Pretty much, yeah. Second, pull the jump. Now, this is the core explosive part. As the bar passes your mid-thigh, you rapidly and powerfully extend your ankles, knees, and hips all at the same time. That's called triple extension. You drive upwards explosively, almost like you're trying to jump straight up.
A literal jump.
Well, your feet might leave the floor slightly, but it's that feeling of powerful upward drive. A sharp shrug of your shoulders happens right at the peak of this extension. This whole jump and shrug motion is where the power comes from. It's what launches the bar upwards.
And the arms.
Your arms should remain basically straight, like ropes with hooks on the end, until after this explosion happens. They guide the bar, keep it close, catch. As the bar reaches its peak height from that explosive pull, you then quickly move your body under the bar. You catch it on the front of your shoulders in the rack position. And crucially, you have to aggressively drive your elbows up and forward high to create a solid shelf to receive and stabilize that bar. Low elbows mean a missed lift or unstable catch.
So the arms stay straight during the pull. That feels really counterintuitive for lifting something.
It does. And it's a common hurdle for learners. You have to resist the urge to pull with your arms early. The power comes from your legs and hips, from that jump. Your back holds the position, your arms guide the bar and apply tension. Bending your arms early, what we call arm pulling, is a major mistake that kills the upward momentum and limits how high you can pull the bar explosively.
Makes sense. It's about transferring leg power. What are the other common pitfalls then?
Oh, because it's so technical, there are quite a few. The biggest mistake, as we said, is trying to muscle it up with the arms and back instead of using that explosive leg and hip drive. So arm pulling is number one. Letting the bar swing out away from your body instead of keeping it close is another big one.
Yeah, that seems inefficient.
Very. Poor timing of the jump, either too early or too late, and failing to get those elbows high and fast enough in the catch position, leading to the bar crashing down or being unstable. Most errors really boil down to not relying on the explosive power generated by that jump from triple extension.
Seems like coaching would be helpful here.
Immensely helpful. Sometimes learning variations first, like the hang power clean, where you start with the bar already off the floor, say at the knee or mid-thigh, can help isolate and teach that crucial second pull, the jump phase, without the complexity of the first pull from the floor. But the value of the power clean, even if it's challenging, lies in developing that explosive power force times velocity. It teaches your body to apply strength quickly. Mastering even the basics adds a really crucial dimension of athletic power development to your training that the other slower lifts don't provide in quite the same way.
Yeah, unpacking the specific technical details for each of these core lifts, the squat, press, deadlift, bench, and power clean, it really drives home how much thought and precision goes into building fundamental strength effectively and safely too. It's clearly not just about moving weight, it's really about how you move it. Absolutely. And they're not just isolated movements, are they? They're designed to integrate and train the body as a cohesive, powerful unit. Developing strength in these foundational patterns, paying close attention to these sometimes subtle points of technique. Well, it requires patience for sure, but it builds a level of functional strength that's genuinely hard to match any other way.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you've ever tried to figure out how to start lifting weights, you probably know the feeling, right?
Yeah.
Just overwhelming information, conflicting advice, like endless programs out there.
Totally. It's easy to get paralysis by analysis before you even touch a barbell.
Exactly. So today, we're going to try and cut through some of that noise. We're taking a deep dive into one really fundamental, widely used approach for beginner strength training, specifically with barbells.
Right.
We want to get at the core principles, understand the why behind them, and see how this system is designed to build a solid foundation, and pretty fast, too.
And understanding these basics is, well, it's absolutely crucial. Beginners are in this really unique training window. Your body is just incredibly responsive to new challenges. So this deep dive, I think it'll really highlight just how quickly beginners can adapt the smart logic behind a very specific training structure.
Okay.
And maybe most importantly, what happens when that initial rapid progress, inevitably starts to slow down.
Right, that plateau everyone talks about. Okay, so let's start with the engine of this whole thing, linear progression. What does that actually mean, like, in the gym?
Simply put, it just means adding a little bit of weight to the bar every single workout.
Every workout.
Pretty much, yeah. So if you squatted, say, 100 kilos for your work sets today,
Okay.
Next session, after your warm-ups, you'd try maybe 102.5 kilos or perhaps 105. It's just a consistent, predictable increase. No complicated percentages or anything like that, not yet.
That sounds almost too simple. Why does that work so well, specifically for someone who's brand new to lifting?
Well, it's because of something people often call the novice effect or, newbie gains.
Right, I heard that one.
Beginners are just super sensitive to the stress of training. A single workout gives enough stimulus to trigger adaptation. Your muscles, your nervous system, they respond really strongly.
Okay.
And the recovery part, it's remarkably fast.
Oh.
Usually within like 48 to 72 hours, you're recovered enough to handle a slightly heavier load.
Oh.
So that allows for that linear workout to workout increase. It's honestly the most efficient way to make progress when you're in that highly adaptable state. You build strength quickly without needing complex cycles or frequent deloads right at the start.
And I imagine there's a huge psychological boost too, right? Seeing that number go up on the bar every single time you train.
Oh, absolutely. Huge. That visible, frequent progress is incredibly motivating. You see tangible results from your effort almost immediately.
Yeah.
Which definitely helps you stick with the program, probably more so than methods where progress might be, slower or less obvious week to week. Builds a ton of confidence.
But okay, this can't last forever, right? Otherwise, everyone would just keep adding weight indefinitely.
Exactly right. It's tied directly to that high sensitivity we talked about. As you get stronger, your body gets, more efficient, more resilient to that same stress. The stress from a single workout provides less relative stimulus, and that window for adaptation from just one section starts to narrow.
Okay, makes sense.
And that's precisely why linear progression eventually, grinds to a halt and you need a change in programming. There's also a practical caution here.
What's that?
If you start too heavy, or you try to jump the weight up too aggressively, too fast, you can actually burn through this rapid adaptation phase prematurely.
Ah, okay. So don't get greedy.
Sort of, yeah. Think of that old story, Milo of Croton, lifting the calf every day as it grew into a bull.
Yeah, I know that one.
It illustrates the concept of progressive loading, sure. But real-world strength training needs planned recovery days and, smart, sustainable weight increases based on how you're actually performing, not just forcing more weight on the bar regardless.
Got it. Okay, so if linear progression is how we increase the weight, what about the overall structure, like the training week itself? How do these sources suggest organizing the workouts?
The classic setup uses a very simple A-B workout split. You basically just alternate between two main sessions through the week.
And how often are you typically hitting the gym then?
Usually 3 times a week. And you need at least a day of rest between sessions. So, Monday, Wednesday, Friday is common. Or maybe Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday.
Okay, typical 3-day split. And what exercises are actually in these A and B workouts?
All right, so workout A is typically the squat 3 sets of 5 reps. Then the overhead press, or just press, also 3 sets of 5. And finally the deadlift, but usually just for 1 set of 5 reps.
Only 1 set for deadlifts. Okay, we'll come back to that. What's workout B?
Workout B keeps the squat, again 3 sets of 5, but it swaps the overhead press for the bench press, also 3 sets of 5.
Okay.
And then it includes either the deadlift again for 1 set of 5, or sometimes if you get stronger and the weights get heavier, it might swap in the power clean for, say, 5 sets of 3 reps. Sometimes alternating with a deadlift, sometimes maybe replacing it later on.
Okay, interesting. So if you start on a Monday with workout A, week 1 would look like A, B, A.
Correct.
And then week 2 would start with B, so it'd be B, A, B.
Exactly right. That alternating pattern just continues week after week. And this structure, it's very deliberate.
How so?
Well, it makes sure you're practicing these key heavy barbell movements frequently. The squat is central. You do it every single session.
Right. Notice that.
Because it's arguably the most demanding, technically complex, full body lift of the bunch.
Yeah.
Training it 3 times a week really maximizes your practice and drives adaptation there.
Makes sense. And the pressing.
Alternating the overhead press and the bench press gives you stimulus for different upper body pressing angles, right? Vertical versus horizontal. But it also allows enough recovery for those pressing muscles so you're not hammering, say, your shoulders constantly.
Okay. And now the deadlift. Why only 1 set of 5? That seems like very little volume compared to the others.
Yeah, it does, but it's really down to the deadlifts. Well, sheer brutality, especially for someone learning.
Brutality.
Okay. Well, it works pretty much the entire body, starting each rep from a dead stop off the floor. It's just incredibly fatiguing.
Especially since in workout A, for example, you're doing it right after heavy squats.
Yeah,
right.
Precisely. Squats have already taxed your system significantly. Keeping the deadlift volume low, that single set of 5, is a really practical way to get the main benefit, which is developing that massive posterior chain strength, without completely overwhelming your recovery capacity or, frankly, risking your form breaking down under extreme fatigue.
Okay, that makes sense. You're already tired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as you get stronger and you're deadlifting heavier weights, the total stress from even that single set increases dramatically. Which is why the program sometimes adjusts later on, maybe reducing deadlift frequency or bringing in power cleans. It's all about managing that overall stress load to keep it in line with your body's ability to recover and adapt. The SRA cycle, basically.
Okay, let's just quickly touch on that term you used, the SRA cycle. What does that stand for again?
Right, stimulus recovery adaptation.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental process of how you get stronger, really.
Okay.
You apply a training stimulus, that's the workout.
Yeah.
That stimulus causes fatigue, some minor muscle damage. Your body then needs recovery time to repair itself and rebuild. And then, during that recovery period, it adapts to that stress by becoming a bit stronger, a bit more resilient, so it can handle a greater stimulus next time.
Got it.
Linear progression works so well for novices because their SRA cycle is very fast. They recover and adapt quickly enough to handle more weight basically every 48 to 72 hours.
Perfect. Okay, that clarifies why that structure is set up the way it is. Now let's zoom in on the sets and reps themselves. Why 3x5 for most lifts, but that 1x5 for deadlifts seems very specific.
It is specific, and it's really a balance tailored for this beginner phase. That 3 sets of 5 reps, it kind of hits a sweet spot.
How so?
Well, 5 reps lets you use a relatively heavy weight, right? Which is crucial for actually developing maximal strength. That's the primary goal here.
Okay.
But importantly for beginners, doing 5 reps per set gives you enough repetitions under that challenging weight to really practice and groove in good form. It's essential technique work.
Right, learning the movement.
Exactly. And while strength is primary, that 5-rep range also contributes significantly to muscle growth hypertrophy, especially for beginners who tend to gain muscle pretty readily alongside strength.
Okay, so strength, technique, some muscle growth. What else?
And 3 sets just provides adequate total work, the volume to stimulate adaptation, without causing so much fatigue that it hinders your recovery for the very next session.
Gotcha. And you mentioned sets across earlier. What's that mean?
Right. Sets across means that after you do your warm-up sets, all of your main work sets, like those 3 sets of 5, are done at the same challenging weight.
Okay. So you're not doing like one heavy set and then dropping the weight for the next 2.
Exactly. The idea is to make all 3 sets count at that top working weight for the day. It ensures consistent, high-quality stimulus across all your work reps.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's the 3x5 logic. Now, back to the 1x5 for the deadlift. We know it's fatigue, but can you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah, as we touched on, it really boils down to managing that massive total body fatigue it produces. Starting every rep from a dead stop is demanding. And remember, you're often doing it after squats on the same day. So even one heavy set is a significant stressor on an already somewhat fatigued system.
Right.
Keeping it to one working set lets you reap the strength benefits of handling heavy weight off the floor, but without completely crushing your recovery or making you so tired that your form goes to pot, which is a real risk with deadlifts.
Okay. So safety and recovery, basically.
Pretty much. Now, some variations might allow for, say, 1 or 2 warm-up sets leading to that one top set, or maybe slightly different schemes. But the core principle is limiting the heavy volume because the intensity is so high. And you've already done demanding work.
Got it.
And while, research debates the absolute single optimal rep scheme for everything, 5 reps is just widely accepted from decades of practical application as a very effective balance point for beginner strength and muscle development.
Okay. So you're running this program, you're adding weight linearly, things are going great, and then, inevitably, they stop. The weight just won't budge, or maybe your form starts getting shaky. You hit that wall, the plateau.
Yep, it happens to everyone. And it's not a failure, it's really just an expected transition point.
Okay.
It essentially means your body's rate of adaptation has finally been outpaced by the rate you're trying to increase the weight. Several things can cause this, especially as the weights get heavier.
Like what?
Well, insufficient recovery is a big one. Sleep, nutrition especially, just eating enough food and protein and managing your outside life stress become absolutely non-negotiable.
Right, life gets in the way.
Totally. Also, poor technique that maybe wasn't obvious with lighter weights can start to break down under heavier loads, leading to inefficiencies or even injury risk. Sometimes it's as simple as trying to add weight and jumps that are just too big for where you're at. And fundamentally, you might have just reached the natural end of that highly sensitive, rapid gain novice phase. You're simply not a newbie in the same way anymore.
So how does this particular system, this approach, suggest you deal with that? How do you break through that first real plateau?
The most common sort of built-in method is usually a deload or a reset.
Okay, what does that involve?
You intentionally back off the weight on the bar for a short period. Maybe take about 10% off the last weight you successfully lifted for your sets and reps.
Right. Seems counterintuitive, lifting less.
It does. But the idea is that fatigue accumulates over weeks and months of hard training, and that accumulated fatigue can actually mask your true strength gains.
Ah, okay.
A deload helps shed that fatigue. The thinking is fatigue drops off faster than fitness does. So by strategically reducing the load, you allow your body to fully recover.
Gotcha.
And often you can come back after that short reset period and continue progressing again, sometimes even hitting a new personal record fairly soon after.
Interesting. Any other tactics?
Microloading is another one. Using very small weight increases like half a kilo or maybe 1 kilo, like those tiny plates.
Yeah, the little ones.
Exactly. They can be especially useful for lifts that use smaller muscle groups, like the overhead press, where making bigger jumps gets really tough sooner. It can help you eke out that linear progression just a little bit longer.
Okay. But what if, say, a reset doesn't really work? You deload, come back, and you're still stuck.
Right. If resets aren't enough, then you really need to look hard at those underlying factors we mentioned.
The sleep, nutrition, stress.
Exactly. Are you honestly sleeping enough? Is your diet actually supporting recovery and muscle growth? Is external stress just completely crushing you? You know, as some respected people in the strength world have pointed out, it's worth asking what specifically is changing during a deload that allows you to come back stronger. Often, it's simply that your lifestyle factors weren't adequate to support the recovery demanded by the previous training load.
So the deload just gave your lifestyle a chance to catch up, in a way.
Could be, yeah. Many plateaus, frankly, aren't purely about hitting a physiological limit. They can be heavily influenced by lifestyle factors or even mindset, maybe underestimating the sheer discipline needed for consistent recovery and nutrition once the weights start getting genuinely heavy.
Yeah, that discipline part is key. Which kind of leads us naturally into program modification and personalization. This system, or the philosophy behind it, at least initially, seems pretty adamant about beginners not messing with the program. You hear that phrase, don't major in the minors.
Yeah, and there's a very good reason for that, especially early on. Arbitrary modifications made by someone without much experience, well, they can easily mess up the program's intended balance.
Right.
They can dilute the stimulus or introduce things that conflict, and then it becomes incredibly difficult to troubleshoot what's going wrong if you hit a wall. It's not really about being dogmatic just for the sake of it. It's more like providing a proven, protective framework for beginners who might otherwise, unknowingly sabotage their own progress by adding too much junk volume or swapping out essential exercises.
But surely there must be times when some kind of modification is necessary, or at least acceptable.
Oh, absolutely. But it should be in specific, well-considered circumstances.
Such as?
Well, obviously, if you have a legitimate injury or perhaps a significant unresolvable mobility issue that truly prevents you from performing an exercise correctly and safely.
Okay.
In that case, alternatives might need to be considered, but ideally after consulting with a qualified coach or a physical therapist. For instance, if a shoulder injury makes barbell pressing genuinely impossible, then maybe a temporary shift to, say, dumbbell pressing could be explored. But you have to understand that's a compromise, and it does change the nature and the loading potential of the program quite significantly.
Right, it's not the same lift.
Not at all. Another common one is equipment access. If you simply don't have access to barbells and squat racks, then you might have to make do with alternatives, like dumbbells or kettlebells. But the goal should always be to stick to the principle of progressive overload, using challenging free weights as much as possible.
Okay. Any other situations?
Individual recovery differences do exist. Some people just genuinely recover a bit slower than others due to age, genetics, lifestyle factors. So very cautious. Minor adjustments to maybe frequency perhaps dropping to 2 days a week for a bit, or slight volume tweaks could be considered down the line, but again, without completely dismantling the basic AB structure.
So if you are in one of those situations, injury, equipment, maybe recovery issues, and you're thinking about making a change, what's the guiding principle? How do you do it smartly?
Okay, number one, Try to understand the why of the original program first. Why these specific exercises? Why these sets and reps? Why this frequency? They were chosen for specific reasons tied to beginner physiology, mechanics, and driving adaptation efficiently.
Know the foundation before you mess with it.
Exactly. Second, whatever changes you contemplate, you must strive to maintain the core principles. Keep the focus on big, multi-joint compound movements. Ensure you are still achieving progressive overload somehow, adding weight or reps over time, and always prioritize getting sufficient recovery.
Okay.
Third, if you do make a change, make it gradual. Change just one thing at a time. Start small, observe the effect for a few weeks, and then be prepared to adjust back or try something else if it's not working. Don't overhaul everything at once.
Makes sense. Hard to know what worked or didn't if you change 5 things.
Precisely. And honestly, the safest and most effective path, especially when you're still relatively new to this, is always going to be getting advice from an experienced, qualified coach or strength professional.
Right, get some expert eyes on it. It sounds like this whole process then, moving from really strict adherence at the start to eventually making thoughtful modifications, that's actually part of the natural progression, right? Moving from being a beginner to someone more intermediate.
That's exactly it. It's a learning process. This initial, quite rigid program for beginners lays that absolutely essential groundwork. It teaches you the lifts, gets you strong quickly, and builds consistency. Once you've mastered those fundamentals, push the limits of simple linear progression, and crucially, started to understand your own body's response to training much better. Well, then moving on to more complex, adaptable programming isn't just allowed, it becomes necessary for continued long-term progress. Subsequent programming often introduces more variables and flexibility precisely because the lifter is no longer a novice.
So the strict rules are like training wheels in a way.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. They get you moving safely and effectively, but eventually you learn to ride without them and navigate more complex routes. So here's something to maybe chew on. If we accept that strength progress isn't linear forever, and that hitting a plateau isn't necessarily a signal to just push harder, but often a signal to adjust strategy frequently by paying more attention to recovery or introducing different kinds of stimulus. How does that idea translate beyond lifting weights? How might acknowledging your body's or even your mind's need for rest, recovery, and strategic adjustment change the way you approach learning a new skill, tackling a big project, or pursuing long-term growth in any really demanding area of your life?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a really specific training approach, one that gets a lot of attention, especially for people just starting out lifting weights.
That's right, the Starting Strength program.
Exactly. So based on what we've looked at, our plan is to really unpack it. What is it fundamentally? Why is it so popular as a starting point?
And also, where might it fall short? We should probably touch on some of the common criticisms, too.
For sure. And maybe compare it a bit to other ways someone might begin training. The idea is really to help you, the listener, figure out if and maybe how this method could fit into your own fitness journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because Starting Strength gets pretty significant results with what looks like a really simple formula for beginners.
Right.
But that same simplicity, well, it stirs up a fair bit of discussion, especially when people stick with it longer or maybe have different goals in mind.
It can seem too simple sometimes, I guess, especially if you're seeing all these complex routines online. So let's get into why it's got such a dedicated following, particularly for newcomers. That simplicity seems like the first major point.
Oh, absolutely. The whole structure is designed to be incredibly straightforward, easy to grasp, easy to actually do.
How so?
Well, it revolves around just a very small number of core barbell exercises: squat, press, deadlift.
The big ones.
Exactly. So for a beginner, this just cuts through all the noise. No confusion about which machine, how many different isolation curls. You just get a clear plan through these lifts. And that ease of entry, that's a huge factor in why people actually start and, importantly, stick with it early on.
And kind of baked right into that structure is maybe the biggest draw, the promise of really fast, measurable strength increases.
Yes. Linear progression. That's the engine, really.
Explain that a bit more.
For someone new, a novice, it means you add a little bit of weight to the bar pretty much every single workout.
Every time.
Almost every time, at least initially. You literally see the numbers go up. You feel yourself getting stronger session after session, or at least week after week.
Wow, okay.
That provides immediate, tangible proof of progress.
Yeah.
And the The psychological impact of that, seeing undeniable improvement every time you go to the gym, it's incredibly motivating.
It's like a direct feedback loop. Do the work, add the weight, get stronger.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It builds confidence like crazy right at the beginning.
It's like leveling up in a video game, but, in real life, 3 times a week.
That's a good way to put it.
And the exercises themselves, they're these big foundational compound lifts we mentioned. Squat, deadlift, the overhead press, bench press.
Exactly right. And they're not picked randomly. They're compound movements.
Yeah.
That just means they work multiple big muscle groups across multiple joints all at the same time.
So more bang for your buck, kind of?
Huh? In a way, yes. It's crucial for building that foundational, usable strength. The kind that actually helps you lift heavy things in real life or improves performance in sports. You're teaching your body to work as a coordinated unit under a load.
Plus, it often gets highlighted as being pretty efficient with time, especially in the early stages.
Initially, yeah, definitely. It's usually structured as 3 workouts per week. And those sessions, especially before the weights get, really challenging, they can often be done in about an hour.
That's practical.
For someone juggling work, family, just trying to build a consistent habit, that relatively small time commitment is a really big selling point.
So, okay, it's not just about getting strong fast. It feels like the program is also designed to teach you the fundamental principles of lifting.
That's a great point. It really is about building a solid foundation. You learn the basic mechanics of these essential barbell movements. There's a strong emphasis on learning proper technique, which is critical. And you internalize the core principle of progressive overloading. The idea that you have to consistently make the exercise harder over time to keep getting stronger.
And those are skills you can take anywhere in strength training, right?
Absolutely essential skills. It provides this sort of basic literacy in how to lift weights effectively and safely. It sets you up for whatever path you might take later.
Okay, so for building that initial base of strength quickly, it sounds incredibly effective. Simple to get started, you see results fast, it builds functional strength, doesn't consume your whole day, and teaches you the ropes.
For that specific goal-building novice strength, yes, it lays down a very, very solid groundwork.
But like you hinted at earlier, it's not all smooth sailing. There are challenges, potential downsides. Let's maybe switch gears now. If you jump into starting strength, what kind of hurdles might you run into?
Well, one pretty immediate practical one is just equipment. To do the program the way it's written, you need specific gear. A proper Olympic barbell, enough weight plates to make those small jumps.
Those little 2.5-pound plates become important.
Crucial. And you absolutely need a squat rack or a power rack, plus a bench.
And not every gym has that set up well.
Exactly. Especially, smaller gyms, maybe hotel fitness centers. Sometimes the equipment isn't there or it's not quite right, or there's only one rack and it's always busy. That can be a genuine barrier for some people.
Okay. And then, while some folks love the routine, others might find doing the same few lifts over and over again a bit, boring.
That's definitely true. Monotony can be an issue for some personalities. You're doing squats, deadlifts, presses, benches, maybe power cleans repeatedly.
Week in, week out?
Yeah. If you thrive on variety or just get bored easily, the lack of exercise rotation and starting strength can feel quite repetitive after a while. Even if the numbers are going up, some people just mentally need more diverse movements to stay engaged long term.
And I imagine as those numbers do keep going up, the workouts themselves get tougher, not just physically.
Oh, absolutely. As you really push that linear progression and the weights get heavy week after week, the sessions become seriously demanding. Physically, yes, but also mentally.
How so?
Grinding out those heavy squats or pulls when you're tired, maybe feeling a bit off, it takes real mental toughness. Facing potential plateaus or just having a bad day under a heavy bar requires significant grit. That increasing strain is something beginners often underestimate.
Gotcha. And then there's this idea we touched on that its core strength, the simplicity, can actually become a limitation down the road.
Yes, precisely. It can become a limitation if your goals evolve beyond just getting maximally strong on those specific lifts.
Right.
While it builds fantastic general strength, its relatively low training volume, meaning the total amount of work, sets times reps, times weight, and the very limited exercise selection might not be the best approach if your main goal becomes, say, maximizing muscle size for aesthetic reasons.
Or maybe training for a sport with different demands.
Exactly. Or targeting specific muscle groups. It's highly focused, which is its strength for building novice strength, but that focus means it's less optimal for other goals simultaneously.
So it's a powerful screwdriver, but maybe not the whole toolbox.
That's a perfect analogy. You need to know what the tool is designed for.
Okay, let's tackle one specific criticism that you hear thrown around quite a bit, and it's got kind of a memorable name, the T-Rex mode, or T-Rex syndrome. What's that all about?
It's basically a visual critique, right? It describes this observation that sometimes people who follow starting strength very strictly for a long time can end up developing noticeably larger lower bodies compared to their upper bodies.
So like big legs, but the upper body hasn't quite kept pace.
Yeah, the phrase big legs, small upper body, too much squatting, and not enough of everything else kind of sums up the perceived look.
Okay, so based on the materials, what's the thinking behind why this might happen? What causes this perceived imbalance?
Well, the critique usually points right back to the program structure and its inherent priorities.
Yeah.
You're squatting 3 times a week. That's a huge amount of stimulus for the legs and hips.
A lot of volume there.
Massive lower body volume. Now, compare that to upper body pressing, the overhead press and the bench press. They're alternated. So each one only gets hit, on average, about 1.5 times per week.
Right, half the frequency of squats.
Exactly. And the program's philosophy emphasizes using the exercises that let you lift the absolute heaviest weights and drive that linear progression the hardest. That naturally favors the squat and deadlift, which heavily involve the lower body and the posterior chain, your glutes, hamstrings, lower back.
What about power cleans? Don't they work the upper back?
They do work the upper back, yes, along with being a full-body explosive movement. But some critics argue they might not provide the same direct muscle-building stimulus for the upper back muscles like your lats and traps, compared to something like a barbell row, which you see in other beginner programs.
Okay, so the structure itself kind of biases the development.
That's the argument. The squat frequency combined with the alternating lower frequency for upper body pressing and the exercise selection potentially favoring lower body strength gains.
So the big question then, is this T-Rex mode a real problem? Or is it just, an aesthetic observation?
Well, whether it's a problem really depends entirely on your individual goals, maybe your genetics too, and how long you actually stick with the program without any changes.
Right.
If your sole goal is pure strength development as a beginner, getting those numbers up on the main lifts, then maybe it's not a problem per se. Your upper body is getting stronger, absolutely.
Yeah.
The program works for its stated purpose. But if your longer-term goal includes balanced aesthetics, or you specifically want to maximize your upper body size, then yeah, it can become a valid concern. The program's design prioritizes strength via the heaviest possible lifts, and aesthetic balance just isn't the #1 objective.
So it reveals that tension between pure strength goals and physique goals if you run it for too long without thinking about balance.
Exactly. It's not that it fails entirely to work the upper body, but its fundamental design choices create a bias.
That makes total sense. It's not really a flaw in the program for its intended purpose, but it might become a limitation depending on your purpose. So if someone is worried about this potential imbalance, either before starting or while doing SS, what are some possible solutions that get mentioned?
The common suggestions usually involve carefully adding some assistance exercises,
Yeah.
especially for the upper body, after you've milked that initial linear progression on the main lifts for all it's worth.
So not right away.
Generally, the advice is to establish that strength base first. Then you might consider adding things like chin-ups, dips, maybe barbell rows exercises that target the upper body pulling muscles, or add pressing volume.
Okay.
You could also just slightly increase the volume, maybe add a set or two to the upper body lifts within the program structure. Or another path is simply deciding to switch to a different program sooner, maybe one that has a more balanced volume distribution between upper and lower body or higher upper body frequency from the start.
So recognizing the program's bias and then adjusting course based on your own priorities.
Precisely. It highlights that, no single program is likely the perfect solution for every goal forever. You might need different tools or modifications as you progress.
Right. That leads nicely into the next point. Muscle growth or hypertrophy. Starting strength is laser focused on strength gain. So how effective is it really for just getting bigger muscles?
Yeah, its primary goal is absolutely unequivocally strength, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
However, particularly for a complete beginner, strength gains and muscle growth are really tightly linked.
You can't really get stronger without building some muscle.
Exactly. As the saying goes, to get stronger, you have to build muscle. And to build muscle, you have to get stronger. Especially when you're new, training for strength will cause muscle growth. It's almost unavoidable.
So how does SS actually contribute to building size, even though that's not its main aim?
Well, first, that 3x5 rep scheme. While it's lower reps than typical bodybuilding, It still involves lifting challenging weights for multiple sets. For someone untrained, that's a significant stimulus for growth.
Okay.
Second, the compound lifts themselves, squat, deadlift, bench, press, they engage huge amounts of muscle mass all over the body at the same time. You're stimulating growth systemically.
And there's the nutrition aspect too, isn't there?
Definitely. The program often strongly emphasizes the need for adequate, even abundant nutrition. Plenty of protein, plenty of calories. Sometimes you even hear recommendations to be slightly overweight, or the classic GeoMad strategy, gallon of milk a day.
Right, which supports recovery and growth.
Exactly. That nutritional fuel is crucial for both rebuilding stronger and building bigger muscle tissue.
But it's fair to say it's not optimized for maximum muscle size gain the way a dedicated bodybuilding program would be.
No, definitely not optimized for that.
Yeah.
If your number one goal is maximizing hypertrophy, you typically need higher overall training volume, just more sets, basically, and utilizing a wider variety of rep ranges, often getting into that, say, 6 to 12 reps per set range, or even higher sometimes.
And starting strength doesn't really do that.
Nope, it sticks mostly to the 3x5. Plus, its reliance on just a few core compound lifts with little or no isolation work, like bicep curls or tricep extensions, means it's not really designed for targeting specific muscles to shape them for aesthetic purposes.
So it comes back to that strength first philosophy again.
It really does. The underlying logic is that building a strong foundation first gives you greater potential for muscle growth later on. Stronger muscles can handle more volume and heavier weights in hypertrophy-focused training down the line.
Makes sense.
However, if building muscle size is your main goal right from the very beginning, then choosing a program specifically designed for hypertrophy with that higher volume and exercise variety might actually be a more direct and efficient route to gaining size initially.
So beginners will gain muscle on SS, especially in their legs and back.
Oh yeah, they'll definitely see growth there.
But it has inherent limitations if the goal is more of a bodybuilder type physique purely from this program.
Correct. As some discussions point out, the program's creator is focused on training strength athletes, not physique competitors. If getting significantly bigger, especially with balanced proportions, is a major objective, you'll probably need to transition to a different style of training or add specific accessory work after you've run through that initial novice strength phase.
It really just hammers home that different training methods are built around fundamentally different primary goals.
Absolutely. And understanding that specific goal is so crucial when you're choosing a program. You need to know what it's designed to deliver.
Okay, so let's try and place starting strength in the bigger picture then. How does it stack up against other common programs or approaches someone new to lifting might be considering?
Well, like we've been saying, starting strength really occupies its own specific niche. It's this dedicated, barbell-centric path aimed squarely at maximizing rapid strength gains for novices.
Right.
So if you compare it to something like, say, StrongLift's 5x5, which is another really popular beginner barbell program.
Yeah, you hear about that one a lot too.
They actually share a lot of similarities. Both focus on beginners, use core barbell lifts, typically run 3 times a week, and rely heavily on that linear progression model.
Okay, so what are the main differences between starting strength and StrongLifts then?
The key distinctions are mainly in the set and rep structure and one key exercise choice. Starting strength is mostly 3 sets of 5 reps, whereas StrongLifts, as the name implies, is 5 sets of 5 reps.
So more volume in StrongLifts.
Significantly more volume, especially on the squat, doing 5x5 3 times a week. The other big difference is the exercise swap. Starting strength includes the power clean for explosiveness and upper back work, while StrongLifts uses the barbell row instead, which is more of a direct upper back strengthening and hypertrophy exercise for many.
So pros and cons either way.
Pretty much. Some argue the higher volume in barbell row and StrongLifts might be better for overall muscle building, particularly the upper back. Others find that 5x5 squat volume just crushing, especially as the weight gets heavy. So choosing between them often boils down to how much volume you prefer, whether you're more interested in the power clean or the barbell row, or honestly, sometimes just which program's app or website you like better.
Okay, interesting. Now, how does starting strength compare to like a typical machine-based program that a commercial gym might push on a beginner?
That's a very different comparison. Machine programs are generally much easier to get started with, right? The path of motion is fixed.
Less intimidating, maybe.
Definitely less intimidating. It requires less technical skill, less coordination initially. So the barrier to entry feels lower and maybe safer for someone completely new or perhaps recovering from an injury. And machines can be good for isolating specific muscles.
But what's the trade-off?
The big trade-off is that starting strength, with its free weights, demands and therefore builds coordination, balance, and it recruits tons of smaller stabilizing muscles all over your body that machines just don't challenge in the same way.
So SS builds more whole body strength and skill.
Exactly. It teaches your body to control and stabilize loads in three-dimensional space. Machines guide the weight for you. So SS builds total body strength and coordination in a way machines don't, even if machines are simpler to use initially.
Got it. And one more comparison. What about against calisthenics or bodyweight training? That's another popular starting point.
Calisthenics has huge pluses, mainly accessibility. You often need little to no equipment. You can do it almost anywhere.
Super convenient.
Totally. And it's fantastic for developing body control, proprioception, and what we call relative strength, how strong you are compared to your own body weight.
So where does it differ most from starting strength?
The main contrast lies in how you apply progressive overload. With starting strength and barbells, it's incredibly simple. Just add a little more weight to the bar. It's very clear, very linear, especially for building absolute strength, just how much weight you can lift, period.
Right.
With calisthenics, getting stronger usually means progressing to more difficult variations of exercises, like moving from push-ups on your knees to standard push-ups, then maybe to decline push-ups or one-arm push-up variations,
Yeah.
or going from bodyweight squats to pistol squats.
Which can feel less straightforward sometimes.
It can be less straightforward than just adding 5 pounds to the bar. It requires learning new skills and movement patterns. So while calisthenics is brilliant for general fitness, body mastery, and relative strength, a barbell program like SS is generally seen as more direct and efficient for developing maximum absolute strength potential.
Okay, so summing up the comparisons, it really sounds like starting strength has carved out this very specific identity in the beginner fitness world.
It absolutely has. It's a targeted barbell-first system, and it's optimized like crazy, for one thing, getting novices maximally strong on those core compound lifts as quickly as possible.
And the others offer different benefits.
Exactly. Calisthenics offers accessibility and body control. Machines offer ease of use and muscle isolation. Other barbell programs like strong lifts offer slightly different volume levels or exercise choices. The really critical point for anyone listening is that the best program for you isn't universal. It depends entirely on your specific goals, what equipment you actually have access to, and honestly, your personal preferences and what you'll stick with.
Understanding what each program is actually designed to do seems key.
That's the real takeaway, I think. Know the goal of the program before you commit.
So we've dug into starting strength pretty thoroughly. It's very clear strengths for building that initial foundation of strength fast, but also the practical hurdles and structural drawbacks it might present. We've talked about specific criticisms like the T-Rex mode, how it fits into the whole strength versus size picture, and how it stacks up against other ways you might start your training journey.
Yeah, covered quite a bit of ground.
Which leads to a final thought for you to consider. We've seen that different training methods really prioritize different outcomes, right? They come with their own unique advantages and trade-offs. So how does truly understanding the specific design goals of a program like starting strength influence, or maybe even reshape your own definition of what successful training actually looks like for you? Welcome to this deep dive. So when you're serious about getting stronger, I mean really serious, like with those programs where you're adding weight pretty much every workout.
Yeah, the aggressive ones. Linear progression stuff.
Exactly. It's so easy to just, focus only on the lifting, the weights, the reps.
Often grind.
Right, the grind. But today we're digging into that other stuff, the critical support system, the things you got to do outside the gym for that progress to actually happen.
Absolutely. It's where the actual getting stronger happens, really.
We're looking at a source that really spells out these kind of foundational principles for heavy training,
Right.
like the infrastructure, yeah.
The stuff that holds it all up. The lifting's just the stimulus.
Let's get into it. Let's unpack what makes this whole system work.
Sounds good. Where should we start? Nutrition.
Yeah, let's start with the engine, nutrition. Our source makes it crystal clear that proper fueling isn't just helpful, it's absolutely essential.
Right. It's fundamental for success, for the
Yeah.
muscle growth you need with this kind of program.
Training is stress, right? That's what the source says. Recovery, getting stronger, that needs fuel.
Exactly. You're putting your body under significant stress with those heavy compound lifts, especially pushing that linear progression, adding weight consistently. So to recover from that stress, to actually make the adaptations, you need enough energy. You need the building materials.
And for beginners especially, Maybe folks who are a bit underweight or really focused on gaining muscle.
Yeah, for them, maintaining a calorie surplus is basically non-negotiable. You just have to get more calories in than you're burning. Simple as that, but crucial.
Okay, but the numbers mentioned, they can sound kind of crazy, like 3,500 up to maybe 6,000 calories a day.
They can seem staggering, yeah. But you got to remember the context.
Okay.
This aggressive fueling is a direct response to the aggressive training stimulus. It's a matched set.
Symbiotic.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The diet's designed to meet those really high demands for recovery and growth that this specific kind of training creates. And of course, those high numbers, they really depend on the individual.
Right. Size, activity level.
Your metabolism, all that stuff. There's even that strategy, Geomand. Gallon of milk a day.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. For hard gainers, usually.
Typically, yeah. Young guys, underweight, struggling to gain. It's a quick way to bump calories and weight. But the source is careful here. It's an aggressive tactic.
Not for everyone.
Definitely not for everyone. Needs a careful approach.
So it's not just stuffing your face, though. Quality matters too, right? Beyond just the calories.
Oh, absolutely. Protein is, well, it's essential. That's for muscle tissue repair and growth.
Yeah.
That's literally how you get stronger after breaking things down.
And the recommendation is pretty high.
Yeah, the source mentions at least 1 gram per pound of body weight, or about 2 grams per kilo. That's more than usual because you're constantly in that cycle of breakdown and rebuilding.
Okay, and carbs.
Carbs are highlighted as the main energy source. You need it for those tough training sessions. Keep those muscle glycogen stores full. Performance depends on it.
And fats. Still crucial. Hormone production, cell function. You need a balance to get all those macros in.
You mentioned the eat big to get big idea, linking the aggressive diet to the aggressive training. But you also hinted it could be a double-edged sword.
It absolutely can be. Look, it works wonders for supporting strength gains because you have the resources for muscle growth. But if you're not managing it well, or maybe you're not a classic hard gainer, it can definitely lead to gaining more body fat than you might want along with the muscle.
So it's not a blank check to eat junk.
Not at all. It underscores that you need a more nuanced approach than just eat everything. For beginners, the source really emphasizes focusing on nutrient-dense, protein-rich meals and eating regularly.
Consistency.
Yeah, consistent nutrient supply. Building sustainable, healthy habits is way more important long-term than just going extreme for a short while.
Okay, that makes sense. Fuel covered. Now, recovery. The source says this is basically when the magic happens. That's a great way to put it. Paying attention to recovery is just as critical as the lifting itself. Maybe more so in some ways.
Why is that?
Because you don't actually get stronger during the workout. That's just the stimulus, right?
Right, the stress.
The actual adaptation, the muscle getting bigger and stronger, that happens during recovery. If you shortchange recovery, you shortchange your results, and you up your injury risk.
It's like planting a seed but not watering it.
Exactly. Perfect analogy. You stunt the growth.
And top of the recovery list, often overlooked, is sleep.
Oh, massively overlooked. But it's vital, foundational, especially for beginners hitting it hard.
Why is sleep so important here?
Well, deep sleep is when your body releases the most growth hormone. That's critical for tissue repair.
Okay.
And REM sleep. That's linked to increased testosterone. Again, key for growth and repair. So aiming for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep. It's not just a nice idea. It's pretty much a requirement for this kind of training.
And if you don't get it, chronic sleep deprivation.
Big problems. It throws your hormones totally out of whack. Less growth hormone, less testosterone, more cortisol, the stress hormone. Yeah. That directly messes with muscle recovery, slows down your strength gains, and makes you way more likely to get injured. It basically jams up that whole process we need.
The SRA cycle, stress recovery adaptation.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
You apply the stress lifting, you need recovery, rest, sleep, nutrition, and then you get adaptation, getting stronger. Sleep deprivation hits that recovery phase hard.
And the program structure, training 3 times a week, that ties into SRA too.
Absolutely. Those rest days between workouts aren't optional. They're built in specifically to allow that SRA cycle time to complete before you hit it again.
So the adaptation happens on rest days.
Precisely. Which means they need to be actual rest days, not days where you go run a marathon or do some other super tiring activity.
What about active recovery though, like light stuff on off days?
The source suggests it can be helpful. You know, light walking, maybe some gentle stretching, mobility work. It might boost blood flow, ease some soreness, but the big caution is it has to be light. It shouldn't be intense enough that it actually interferes with your recovery from the lifting. It's recovery support, not another workout.
Got it. So balancing the intensity of training with enough rest is crucial to avoid overtraining.
Exactly. You keep pushing the intensity without respecting that need for rest, and you dig yourself into a hole. Overtraining.
And that means...
It's not just plateauing. It can mean actually losing strength, feeling constantly fatigued, getting sick more often, and much higher injury risks.
So you need some flexibility. Listen to your body.
You absolutely have to. If you're feeling wrecked, if fatigue is just piling up, you need the awareness and the courage to back off a bit. Maybe adjust the intensity, maybe take an extra rest day.
And even rest during the workout matters. Between sets.
Oh, hugely. Heavy lifting uses up ATP, your muscles' immediate fuel. You need enough rest between those heavy sets, often 3 to 5 minutes, maybe even more, for ATP to recover.
Otherwise, the next set suffers.
Performance drops and form can break down, increasing risk. Skipping rest between sets is counterproductive.
Okay. Fuel, recovery. Now, staying safe. Injury prevention. These programs work, but let's be real. Lifting heavy weights has risks.
Like any serious physical activity,
Yeah.
But the source gives really clear principles to manage and minimize those risks significantly.
And number one is...
Form. Correct form. On every single exercise, every single rep. It's the absolute foundation.
The program gives detailed instructions.
Very detailed. And learning those, practicing them, applying them consistently, that's vital. Bad form puts stress where it shouldn't be, joints, ligaments, and that's how you get hurt.
And it gets harder as the weight goes up, which is the whole point of the program.
That's the crux, isn't it? Linear progression means the weight is always increasing, testing your technique. Flaws get magnified under heavy load.
So focus is key.
Intense focus on form for every rep. Recording yourself can be eye-opening. Or getting a good coach to watch you. Highly recommended.
Progression is good, but needs to be smart progression.
Absolutely. Gradual and rational. Adding weight too fast or jumping up in weight too much. Your body, especially tendons and ligaments, needs time to adapt. Rushing it is asking for trouble.
So incremental increases within capacity.
Yes. And always prioritize keeping good form. If your form starts breaking down significantly on your work sets, that's a huge red flag. Maybe too big a jump, maybe just not ready yet.
The source says start light.
Rate emphatically. Start light enough that your form is impeccable, then progress slowly, consistently. Progress will come. Being overly aggressive, especially if form suffers, that's where the risk shoots up.
And warming up properly before you even touch those work weights.
Essential. Absolutely essential. Prepares the muscles, the joints, reduces injury risk.
What does a good warm-up look like in this context?
Some light cardio first, maybe 5 minutes. Then for the lift you're doing, start with the empty bar. Do a few reps. Add some weight, do a few more reps. Keep adding weight in jumps, doing fewer reps each time until you're near your work weight.
So it increases blood flow, muscle temp.
Gets you flexible, primes the nervous system for that specific movement pattern. Skipping or rushing the warm-up makes those first heavy sets much, much riskier.
Okay, last point on prevention. Listening to your body. That whole no pain, no gain thing.
Yeah, that can be really dangerous in lifting.
Yeah.
You have to learn the difference between normal muscle soreness DOMS, that delayed ache, and actual injury pain.
How do you tell the difference? What are those injury signals?
DOMS is usually a general dull ache. Peaks a day or two later, feels better with light movement. Injury pain is often different. Think sharp, stabbing pain, especially sudden during a lift.
Okay.
Or persistent pain that just doesn't go away with rest, lingers for days. Pain in the joint itself, maybe with swelling or instability. Pain that radiates, shoots down an arm or leg.
And pain that stops you doing things.
Yeah, functional loss. Pain so bad it seriously limits daily activities or doing the exercise properly. Those are all warning signs, not DOMS.
Are there common spots people feel things with this kind of training, like low back, shoulders?
Yeah, lower back, shoulders, knees, those are common areas where issues can pop up.
Oh.
Often it's down to subtle form errors or pushing progression just a bit too fast.
Even though the techniques are meant to be safe.
The techniques, like low bar squats reducing knee stress or good bench form protecting shoulders, are designed to be biomechanically sound and preventative, but only if you execute them correctly. These areas are often where form breaks down first under load.
So mild soreness rest, maybe some stretching, heat cold?
That can often help manage typical soreness, yeah. But, and this is critical if you get those sharp injury signals we talked about, or pain bad enough it interferes with life, stop.
Stop the exercise.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And get it checked out by a professional.
Who's the right person? Doctor? Physio?
A qualified medical professional. Your doctor, maybe an orthopedist or a physical medicine specialist. A good physical therapist, especially one who understands lifting, is often fantastic.
Not just push through it.
Definitely not. A knowledgeable coach can help with form, but diagnosis and treatment need a medical pro. The source really pushes back on that hardcore attitude of injuries are just part of the game.
Especially for beginners.
Especially for beginners. It's counterproductive. Focus on minimizing risk through good practice, not just accepting injury. And finding pros who get heavy lifting can be tough sometimes.
Which makes self-monitoring even more important.
Exactly. You need to be vigilant about those signals.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Accessory work. Extra exercises. The source mentions the program traditionally keeps these minimal for beginners.
That's right. The core philosophy, especially early on, is focus. Focus on the big compound lifts. Squat, press, deadlift, bench, maybe power cleans.
And the reasoning is?
Two main things. First, those big lifts work so much muscle mass simultaneously, they provide a huge stimulus for overall growth in beginners. You get a lot of bang for your buck. Second, beginners have limited recovery ability. You want to invest that precious recovery capacity into getting better and stronger at the most effective exercises. Adding a bunch of extra, less critical stuff can actually dilute your recovery.
And slow down progress on the main lifts.
Precisely. Don't major in the minors, basically.
But there are arguments for adding accessories later on, right?
Yeah, definitely. Accessory work has its place. It's not inherently bad, just needs timing. It can be really useful for targeting specific weaknesses.
Like if one muscle group is lagging and holding back a main lift.
Exactly. Or imbalances. It can also help with injury prevention sometimes, strengthening stabilizers or opposing muscles. And let's be honest, aesthetics.
Ah, the Chirano mode.
Yeah, that idea that maybe squats and deadlifts give you huge legs and back, but arms or upper back might seem less developed relatively. Accessories can address that.
And maybe help with technique?
Sometimes, yeah. Strengthening a specific part of the movement, like triceps for bench press lockout.
So what's the recommendation from the source? When is it okay, or even good, to add some?
Generally, for the first, say, 2-3 months of pure linear progression, if your nutrition and recovery are dialed in, probably not needed. Stick to the core lifts.
But then,
Consider adding small, carefully chosen amounts when linear progression really starts to slow down or stall, when you identify clear weak points holding you back,
Okay.
or if specific muscle imbalances or aesthetic goals become a bigger priority for you.
What kind of accessory exercises are we talking about?
Things like pull-ups or chin-ups are classics, often added later anyway.
Mm.
Dips, barbell rows if you're not power cleaning.
Yeah.
Great for upper body mass and balance.
Anything else?
Maybe some direct core work like planks or leg raises for stability. That helps everything.
And the key is not overdoing it.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
If you add accessories, start with low volume, like 1 or 2 exercises, maybe 2-3 sets each after your main work. It absolutely must not interfere with your recovery for the next main lifting session.
That makes sense. It often seems like people start wanting accessories when LP naturally gets tough or their goals shift a bit.
Yeah, that's often a natural point of evolution for the program. Your needs change, your capacity changes.
So wrapping this up, we've really dug into these critical support systems for serious strength training, fueling, recovery, safety.
And what really stands out from the source is that these aren't just extras. They're foundational. They're interconnected. They have to work with the training.
You can't just hammer the weights and ignore the rest. Ignoring nutrition, skimping on sleep, letting form slide. It's not just slowing you down.
It's actively working against your goals, and it seriously increases your risk of getting sidelined by injury.
It really is fascinating how it all links together. Sleep affects hormones, hormones affect recovery, recovery affects strength gains and safety. It's all one system.
It truly is. Which leads to a good question for anyone listening. Think about your own routine, everything outside the gym sessions. Is there one piece of this support system, maybe something you've overlooked, that could be the key to unlocking your next level of progress inside the gym?
So you've been hitting the weights. Maybe you jumped on one of those beginner programs, linear progression. It's supposed to get you strong fast.
It probably worked great for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Those initial gains feel amazing, almost like magic, adding weight every single session. But then, it slows down. You start hitting those plateaus. The bar feels heavier, doesn't move like it used to.
Right.
So we're going to do a deep dive into that specific moment,
Yeah.
that transition point where the easy gains kind of dry up, and figure out, okay, what's next? How do you keep getting stronger?
That beginner phase, the linear progression, it's super effective, mainly because it's a totally new, big stress on your body.
Right, it's novel.
Exactly.
Wow.
So your body can adapt really quickly, session to session. You add weight, recover just in time, add more weight. You see huge jumps in strength and how well your nerves talk to your muscles.
It feels like you've totally cracked the code. But, I mean, that pace,
Yeah.
it can't last forever, right?
No way. Your body's ability to recover from that constant increase, session after session, it hits a limit. It maxes out.
Okay, so how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know for sure you've actually, graduated from being a beginner lifter? What are the real signs?
Well, it's less about hitting some magic number on the squat or deadlift and more about the fact that your linear progress just stops working.
Okay.
The biggest signal is probably hitting repeated plateaus. You try to add weight, maybe you fail reps.
There.
You might deload, reset, make a tiny bit of progress, and then bam, you're stuck at the exact same weight again. And this is when you feel like you're doing everything else right, eating enough, sleeping enough, form feels solid.
It's not just a bad day at the gym.
No, it's more fundamental. It's your body basically saying, hey, adding weight every single time isn't the right kind of stress anymore. I need something different to adapt.
And I guess that ties into recovery, too. It starts getting harder.
Absolutely. As the weights get really heavy for you, the overall stress from those intense workouts just skyrockets. Recovering fully in that, 48 to 72 hours between sessions, it becomes a real struggle.
You feel it outside the gym, too?
Definitely. You might notice this kind of lingering fatigue that just hangs around, affects your day-to-day life, not just feeling wiped right after lifting. If you're consistently lagging on recovery, that's a huge sign the program's intensity and frequency isn't sustainable for you anymore.
And the actual progress, speed changes.
Precisely. Instead of adding weight like every single time you train that lift.
Which feels amazing.
It does. But now that timeline stretches out. You might only see tiny gains, maybe measured week to week, or sometimes even longer, like month to month.
So you shift from tracking session progress to weekly or monthly progress.
Yeah. When your progress tracking changes like that, you're pretty clearly past that initial rapid LP phase.
Okay, so just to nail this down, it is not about hitting, say, a 140 kilo squat or a 180 kilo deadlift or whatever arbitrary number.
No, definitely not. That's a really crucial point we saw in the material. Those numbers are so individual. Depends on your body weight, your age, sex, genetics, obviously, how long you've been at it.
Even just your gym setup, maybe.
For sure. The defining thing, the threshold you cross, is simply when your specific body stops giving you those linear gains from session to session weight jumps.
And this isn't some unexpected failure, right? This transition is actually part of the plan in strength training theory.
Oh, yeah, it's totally expected. It's a natural part of the process talked about in, foundational strength training books. Things like practical programming really map this out. It's not seen as the end of the road.
Right.
It's just the start of a new phase, a phase that needs, a smarter, different kind of programming.
Okay, so you've seen the signs. Plateaus you can't break, recovery's dragging, progress is measured over weeks now. What's the big change needed in the training program itself?
The main idea is you need to shift to what are called intermediate programs. And these programs work by manipulating the training variables, mostly intensity and volume, but they do it on a weekly basis.
Not session to session anymore.
Right. They create this sort of weekly cycle of stress and recovery. That linear session by session loading just isn't effective anymore. Your body needs that different kind of wave, that stimulus pattern to keep adapting.
Gotcha. And there are a few well-known ways to structure this. One that often comes up as a kind of direct follow-on is the Texas method.
Yeah, the Texas method is a classic intermediate program, often seen as a good step after something like starting strength. It usually runs 3 days a week, still focused on the big barbell lifts.
How's it structured typically?
You'll usually have a high volume day early in the week, think maybe 5 sets of 5 on your main lifts, then a lighter recovery or light day midweek, lower stress, good for technique work, and just letting the body recover a bit. And then later in the week, you have an intensity day. That's where you push for new personal records, often aiming for a single heavy set of 5 reps on a key lift.
So the volume day provides the big stimulus, the light day helps you recover, and the intensity day is where you sort of cash in on that adaptation.
That's the core concept. It's a weekly cycle. Stress, recover, adapt, demonstrate strength. leads to progressive overload measured week by week.
Makes sense.
One really important tip, though, highlighted in the material from coaches like Andy Baker, is you shouldn't just jump into Texas Method using the weights you finished your LP with.
Ah, okay. Don't start too heavy.
Exactly. So if your last good LP squat was, say, 3 sets of 5 at 165 kilos, your first Texas Method volume day might actually start lower, maybe 5 by 5 at 150 or 155 kilos.
Right.
And your intensity day goal for that first 1 by 5 might also start a bit below your old 3 by 5 weight, like maybe 156 kilos. You need to ease into it, let your body adapt to the new structure and volume.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah. Avoid just crashing and burning on week 1. Another approach mentioned is HLM, heavy, light, medium.
HLM is maybe a bit more flexible, also usually 3 days a week. But instead of having dedicated volume and intensity days for everything, HLM varies the intensity for individual lifts, or maybe the whole day.
So you could mix it up within a session.
Yeah, you might do heavy squats, but then medium bench and light deadlifts all in the same workout. Then the next time you do those lifts, you rotate the intensity, maybe medium squats, light bench, heavy deads.
The principle there sounds more like managing the overall stress load each time you train.
Pretty much. It's about managing recovery by constantly juggling the intensity levels for different lifts. It allows you to hit each lift maybe more frequently, but with varying stress. It can be a bit easier sometimes to tailor it to how you personally recover.
Okay. And then the third big one, which is super popular, is 531 from Jim Wendler.
Right, 531 focuses heavily on the 4 main lifts: squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. It's built around cycles, usually 3 or 4 weeks long.
And the reps and intensity change each week within that cycle.
Exactly. Like week 1 might be sets of 5 reps, week 2 sets of 3 reps, week 3 might involve hitting a single heavy rep, and then often you do an as many reps as possible set, an AMRAP set, on your last main work set.
Ah, the AMRAP sets. That's where you kind of push yourself and gauge progress.
Yeah, those AMRAP sets are key for driving progress beyond the prescribed reps. And 531 is also known for having a lot of flexibility in how you add accessory work stuff to target weak points or build more muscle.
So it sounds maybe a bit slower, steadier progress.
Generally, yeah. It's often seen as a more gradual approach than something like the Texas Method. This can be really good for long-term recovery management and consistency. It usually works off percentages of a training max, which is itself typically like 90% of your actual 1 rep max. Keeps things sustainable.
So, okay, Texas Method, HLM, 531. Different structures.
Yeah.
But the common theme is moving past just adding weight linearly every session. Now it's about managing volume and intensity over a weekly cycle.
That's the fundamental shift. And critically, all those skills you built as a beginner, the discipline, learning the lifts properly, those are absolutely essential. They carry over and form the foundation for success in any of these intermediate programs.
And choosing between them isn't about which one is universally the best.
Not really. It's much more about finding the best fit for you. Your training history, how well you recover, what your specific goals are, maybe more strength, maybe more muscle, and honestly, just what fits your life and schedule.
Okay, so moving beyond just the program design, building strength over the long haul, like years, seems to need more than just good sets and reps.
Oh, absolutely. Once you're past that beginner stage where progress feels almost automatic if you just show up, your mindset, your daily habits, they become just as important, maybe even more important than the specific program you're running.
That discipline you built early on is the foundation, though.
For sure. But you need to evolve it.
So what are those key mental shifts people need to make?
Well, first off, patience and consistency. Huge. Real strength building is a long game. A marathon, not a sprint, you know? That super fast growth you saw at the start, it will slow down. And you have to accept that's normal.
Get comfortable with slower progress.
Yeah, you need to shift your focus to celebrating those slow but steady gains. And you need to build the resilience to just keep grinding through plateaus, because they will happen now. They're part of the intermediate and advanced journey.
It sounds like focusing less on just the number on the bar and more on the actual process.
Exactly. Really dialing in your form, understanding why your program is set up the way it is, learning to listen to your body's signals. That becomes crucial. And honestly, the mental toughness you build from pushing through hard training sessions day after day, that resilience helps you handle tough stuff outside the gym too.
And you can't just read the first book and think you know it all.
Definitely not. Exercise science keeps moving forward. You got to keep an open mind, keep learning about recovery, nutrition, different training ideas, and be willing to actually apply that new knowledge to what you're doing. Those initial principles you learned, they're just the starting point.
Requires a bit of humility too, I imagine.
Oh, massive humility. You have to be able to look at your training objectively, admit when you mess up, learn from it, and know when to ask for help, maybe from a coach or someone more experienced. Plateaus, missed lifts, even getting small injuries. It's all going to happen. Being able to analyze why without letting your ego get in the way and then adjusting, that's what keeps you moving forward long term.
Okay, so the mindset is key. What about the day-to-day stuff, the habits? What's non-negotiable?
Well, number one is just sticking to the plan. Training adherence. Whatever program you pick, you got to actually do it consistently. Showing up and putting in the work week after week, that's the single biggest factor for long-term results.
Can't skip workouts and expect progress.
Nope. And you got to fuel that work. Nutrition is absolutely non-negotiable. Getting enough calories overall and getting the right balance of protein, carbs, fats, that's essential for building muscle and recovering from the training. Sustainable, healthy eating, not crazy crash diets.
Sleep always comes up too.
Critically important. You need that quality sleep, aiming for 7, 8, maybe 9 hours. That's when most of the muscle repair and hormone stuff happens. And taking your planned rest days. Letting the body actually recover and adapt.
What about stress outside the gym? Does that matter?
Hugely. Chronic stress, whether from work, life, whatever, it jacks up cortisol levels. And high cortisol can seriously mess with your recovery and your ability to build muscle. So actively managing stress, finding ways to relax, hobbies, whatever works for you is actually part of good training.
And finally, just staying healthy enough to train at all.
Yeah, injury prevention and management. Always prioritizing good form, listening to your body. Those little aches aren't always nothing. Sometimes they're warnings. Maybe incorporating specific warm-ups or mobility work. And if you do get injured, deal with it properly. Get professional help if needed, and commit to the rehab so you can get back safely. These habits, they're not just extras. They're the foundation for being strong and capable for life.
Let's bring it back to where a lot of people start this journey, maybe with a program like Starting Strength. Given everything we've talked about, the transition, the long-term view, how does a program like that hold up when you look at it through today's exercise science lens?
Yeah, Starting Strength has had a massive impact, no doubt. Since it came out around 2005, it's gotten countless people into barbell training. And honestly, its core principles really do align well with basic exercise science.
Like progressive overload. That's fundamental.
Totally. The whole program is built on linear progression, which is just a direct application of the most basic rule for getting stronger and building muscle. You need to progressively increase the stress on the body. That's rock solid, scientifically.
And the focus on big compound lifts.
Also very well supported. Squats, deadlifts, presses, multi-joint movements are super efficient. They hit lots of muscle groups at once, improve how your nerves control muscles, build that useful functional strength. Science backs that up completely.
And the overall structure follows that basic adaptation model.
Right. It's clearly based on the stress recovery adaptation cycle. For a beginner who tends to recover pretty quickly, hitting things hard and frequently, followed by just enough recovery, is a really effective way to drive rapid initial adaptation.
But you hinted earlier that modern science might offer some other perspectives or points for discussion.
Yeah, looking at the research now, there are definitely some interesting things to consider, especially if your goals are only pure strength. Maybe you also really care about muscle size, hypertrophy, or just overall balanced development.
Okay, like what?
Well, for maximizing muscle growth specifically, a lot of current research suggests that higher total weekly training volume might be better. Also, using a wider variety of rep ranges, not just sets of 5, and incorporating more different exercises could be more optimal than the lower volume minimalist approach of basic starting strength.
More exercise variety helps.
Some studies indicate that, yeah. Programs with more exercise variation sometimes show better gains in both strength and size across more muscle groups. Keeps the stimulus fresh, hits muscles from different angles.
What about the complexity of the lifts themselves for someone brand new?
That's a fair point people raise. Lifts like the low bar squat or the power clean are pretty technical. They really benefit from good coaching. If you're an absolute beginner trying to learn them from a book or video, well, the risk of doing them wrong, maybe getting hurt or just not getting the intended stimulus, it's higher.
So maybe simpler versions first.
Some modern approaches might suggest that, yeah, starting with maybe goblet squats or Romanian deadlifts, or just a more phased approach to learning the complex lifts perfectly before loading them heavy.
And what about the programming structure itself, long term?
Yeah.
Linear progression has its limits, as we said.
Right. LP is fantastic for beginners. But for intermediate and advanced lifters, research generally shows that more complex ways of organizing training, different types of periodization, like Undulating, where intensity and volume change week to week, or block periodization, where you focus on specific qualities for chunks of time, tend to work better for driving progress long term.
And even the starting strength system evolves past basic LP, right?
Exactly. If you look at their follow-up materials, like practical programming, they absolutely introduce more complex periodized models for lifters once linear progression stops working. They recognize the need for that evolution.
So it sounds like SS is a great starting template, but maybe not the perfect fit for every single person or every single goal forever.
That's a good way to put it. Starting strength gives you this pretty standardized model, which is great for getting started, but modern coaching and the research really emphasizes tailoring things more. We know there's huge individual variation in recovery, genetics, lifestyle, even just how people are built.
Right.
So while the template works well for many beginners, eventually, most people will benefit from adjustments based on their individual needs.
And then there's the aesthetic thing,
Yeah.
the infamous T-Rex mode.
Yeah. Because the basic SS program hammers the squat and deadlift so hard and has comparatively less volume for upper body pulling and pressing, some people find their lower body develops much faster than their upper body. It can create an aesthetic imbalance for some folks.
Which might not matter to everyone, but for some it does.
Right. And a lot of modern programs try to address that from the start with maybe a broader selection of exercises or a more balanced volume distribution across body parts.
So wrapping it all up, starting strength, powerful tool, great for building that initial base, scientifically sound core ideas, but not the final answer. And definitely not something to just keep doing forever without thinking.
That really sums up the key takeaway from the material, I think. It's an excellent foundation, its principles hold up, but becoming a successful lifter long-term means being flexible. It means learning from new science, adapting your training as you change, as your goals evolve, and knowing when and how to transition to the next stage. That's crucial for a lifelong journey in strength.
So think about this. The strength you build, it's not just about the kilos on the bar. It's really measured in the resilience you develop, the discipline, that ability to adapt you cultivate along the way. The journey after those easy beginner gains. It's less about searching for one single magic program and more about becoming the smart architect of your own continued progress.